and get this kicked off. So I'd like to welcome everyone to the Dallas Dealmakers program presented by the ACG DFW Young Professionals. My name is Kayla Marsh. I'm a senior manager with the BKD working in the healthcare private equity space, and I'm the new YP chair for ACG DFW this year. It's my pleasure to welcome you this morning as moderator of today's panel. We have a few housekeeping items to go over before we begin. You have been muted and your video has been switched off for the time being. Our ACG staff will be turning your video back on, and you'll be able to unmute once we move into our networking portion. If you have questions for the panel, please use the chat box function. The chat box should be only used for panel questions. If you have any other questions or issues, please send a private message to Brittany or Christy with ACG DFW. I'd like to take a moment and thank the YP committee who put this panel together. Our DFW chapter is so lucky to have such involved and dedicated individuals, and I'm thrilled to take on this leadership role with them. I'd like to also take a moment and thank our sponsors. You can see behind us. While we can't meet in person, they have been flexible and willing to try new and exciting ways to help bring everyone together. Thank you to our 2019 and 2020 ACG DFW chapter growth sponsors. So first, our platinum sponsors, BDO, Haynes and Boone, Winston and Strawn, and our gold sponsor, UMB Bank. I'd also like to thank our Young Professional Series sponsor, Calvetti Ferguson. We'll hear more from them shortly. Thank you all for your investments in ACG DFW and helping bring the M&A community together across the Metroplex. Now, I'd like to let you know how this morning will flow. We'll begin with the panel discussion, move into your questions that you've given us in the chat box, and then we'll finish with some small structured networking. You can sit back, relax until we move into the networking portion. You'll be requested to turn your video back on, and once you move into your breakout room, you'll need to unmute yourself. And that's it. So it's my privilege to introduce Michelle Macklin, an advisory associate with Calvetti Ferguson, to give a few remarks on the firm and introduce our panel. Michelle, welcome.
Thank you, Kayla. Good morning, and thank you for having us join today. My name is Michelle Macklin, and I'm on the advisory team at Calvetti Ferguson, and I live and work in Fort Worth. Calvetti Ferguson is one of the largest independent accounting and advisory firms based in Texas. We have offices in every major Texas metro area to serve clients locally, nationally, and globally. As trusted business advisors to privately held and public companies, private equity funds, family offices, and high net worth individuals, we provide assurance, tax, advisory, accounting, and technology risk services. We advise beyond accounting to eliminate hurdles, identify opportunities, and ensure the best for our clients and their businesses. We are recognized by Forbes as one of America's top recommended tax and accounting firms. We are also an Inside Public Accounting Top 300 and fastest growing firm. We are an independent member firm of Prime Global and a proud sponsor of the Association for Corporate Growth, who hosts great events like this one today. Our firm is deeply invested in the DFW market, M&A market, and offers strategic transition support for the middle market through both buy-side and sell-side advisory processes. Calvetti Ferguson offers custom quality of earnings reports based on scoping discussions with the client, and we balance procedures with deal risk and budget. We offer a complete sell-side process from data room to LOI and from LOI to closing. This process includes valuation, QV, accounting, and tax consulting. Our firm partners with our clients to ensure that the M&A process aligns with their own needs and vision. So with that being said, I'm pleased to be able to announce our panelists today. Marcus Kyprios is the founder of Blackland Distilling. After 15 years of practicing law, he turned his attention to culinary school became a certified sommelier, and finally set his sights on liquor creation. Blackland is based out of Fort Worth and has a fantastic tasting room that is open. Welcome, Marcus. Eric Priamo is a senior associate at Palomino Capital, focusing on analytics, capital raising, and financial advisory support for middle market transactions. Palomino handles buy and sell side and capital formations with the ability to adjust to an ever-changing market. Welcome, Eric. We have two Erics today. Eric Wessinger began as a professional recruiter before joining Richard's Supply Company, AKA the family business, when they expanded to Fort Worth. He became CEO in 2019. Richard's Supply provides products and services to the industrial and contractor markets, including protective equipment. Welcome, Eric. Lastly, our moderator, Kayla Marsh, who you've already seen, will be joining these gentlemen and guiding our discussion. Kayla is a senior audit manager at BKD who focuses on portfolio companies of private equity groups. Kayla, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Michelle. We're very grateful to have you guys as a sponsor for the YP group. So thank you for your time and your support. So I guess we're going to get into the main show, the main event. So, you know, the YP group got together about a month ago, and we started thinking, what is something that we want to hear? The first thing that came to our mind was, do we want to talk about PPP? And we thought, well, I think everybody's heard a lot about the PPP. So let's think about looking a little more forward and not worrying so much about the past. And so, you know, we said, let's think of something that is innovation is the big thing these days. Let's come up with something that we can share with business owners and operators in the Metroplex that are here close to home, and probably things that we've also seen in news articles or news clips about what we're hearing is happening. And so we thought no better. Let's bring in Eric W. from Richard's Supply, who is really talking about supply and demand, which is something we hear about in the grocery stores every day, whether it's toilet paper or hand sanitizer. And then we thought, even better, Marcus from a distillery, everybody's heard the great innovations that the distilleries have made in the past couple of months. And so, and lastly, we thought, well, we've got to have somebody here, you know, with ACG. Let's talk to Eric, and Eric really give us a good market perspective of where things are. So to kind of kick us off, Michelle gave a good brief introduction, but Eric W., Marcus K., Eric P., you guys want to give kind of a short introduction for yourself and more so about your company, what you're focused on in your company right now, and probably the relative revenue size that you work with as well. So Eric W., I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Kayla. Again, my name is Eric Wessinger. I'm with Richard's Supply Company. We're an industrial distribution house based out of Waco. We have operations here in Fort Worth as well as down in Temple, Texas. So we're supplying manufacturing, light industrial, and commercial construction customers with all the supplies and services they need to perform and be good resources for their customers. So we operate, we've got about 50 employees, and you know our revenue ranges in that, you know, kind of 12 or 15 to 20 million annual range.
Thanks, Eric. Marcus?
Hi, I'm Marcus Kiprios. I'm Blackland Distillery. We make ultra premium vodka, gin, bourbon, and rye whiskey. And for the last 2 months, we've also made hand sanitizer. We've only been open since March of 2019. And we signed a distribution agreement with Benny Keith last September. So we've been on liquor store shelves for about 8 months. And then in that time, we've expanded pretty quickly to outside of DFW, to Houston, to Austin, to San Antonio, to El Paso, and places of that nature, most major cities in Texas. Revenue size will do about, well, who knows this year, but I'm projecting to do about 1.4 million, so that we're much smaller, but not bad for just starting out and the spread that we've gotten, especially lately in liquor stores, which have become crazy because everyone has hoarded and decided to drink at home.
Thanks, Marcus. And Eric P.?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Eric Priamo. I work with Palomino Capital. Palomino is a boutique investment bank focusing on sell-side engagements primarily. So we're representing a client through an M&A transaction. Every now and again, we will do a capital raise, maybe like a debt raise, debt and equity. We focus on companies as low as 3 to 5 million of EBITDA up to 20, 25 million plus. And our kind of sweet spot is 5 to 10, 5 to 12 million of EBITDA. We're industry agnostic, except we do tend to avoid oil and gas. We don't do a lot of work there. And then on our other side, we do have a little investment arm where we're purchasing companies and kind of a private equity family office style investment where we're buying a company, trying to hold on to it for 3 to 5 years and then exit.
All right, great. Thanks, Eric and Marcus. You'll hear me constantly referencing Eric T or Eric W. So if I don't say one of the two, then they'll probably yell at me. But so I guess really getting into it, Eric W., I'll kind of hand it off to you. So you once explained to me Richard's Supply is kind of a American middleman. So tell me, obviously, since COVID has happened, what have you guys had to do to pivot and address these types of demands and supply issues, and how has that impacted what your day-to-day business looks like?
Sure, I can speak to that. So it's in our world, inventory is a big thing anyway, and so we try to always run as efficiently as possible to make sure that we have enough inventory to cover our customers' needs. At the same time, not have a warehouse full of product that's just sitting there collecting dust. So over the last 3 months, we've had to be very nimble in terms of the amount of inventory that we're bringing in, as well as trying to identify new sources of inventory. So take, hand sanitizer or respiratory masks and face masks, for example, is that, our typical suppliers, which would be, Purell and 3M and Honeywell, have some very dramatic restrictions in terms of what's available to non-medical businesses or non-medical people like us. So we've had to go out and try to identify new sources and try to find, manufacturers and wholesale distributors who maybe we haven't done business with in the past, and try to create relationships on the fly and bring in enough inventory to support our customers' needs as they come up. We've had to, kind of have some hard conversations when supplies are not available, and trying to come up with ways to still try to find alternative solutions for our customers. And then, there's been other resources like safety glasses and maybe some other fringe PPP, personal protection items that aren't necessarily under shortage, but could be at any minute, so we've had to ramp inventory in a couple of items like that, to where maybe we're bringing in 6 to 8 months worth of inventory just to protect us from any future shortages that might come up down the line.
Okay, great. Marcus, how about you guys? I mean, obviously you said you started off with it. You started developing hand sanitizer. Tell us, what that process looks like and then where it stands today.
Yeah, well, first, obviously, it's not as fun as making vodka or gin or bourbon or rye. And I didn't really enjoy it in the sense that sometimes outside of the distillery at the height of this, it was like The Walking Dead out there, and people had heard we were making hand sanitizer, and then everyone wanted some, everyone needed some, and we couldn't give it away to all the places that we wanted to donate it to. So in that sense, that wasn't super fun. But I will say, like on the other side of that, it was nice to have an additional revenue stream, because we did start making it and selling it to offset the donations we were making. But it was a completely different type of alcohol. It's the cleanest form of alcohol you can have is drinking alcohol. I mean, we're making that for people, obviously, to ingest. But to set up a hand sanitizer production line is much different than setting up a distilled spirits production line. You're using the same equipment, but you have different chemicals you have to mix. It took us a good 7 or 8 days to switch over because we were doing it for the first time, and the FDA allowed distilleries to do this. And then for a good 2 months, we made hand sanitizer. But the problem is not the hand sanitizer. It's the bottles, the labels, the tops, the sealers, the boxes, the distribution. It's a completely different business because my distributor will deliver vodka to any liquor store that we need to go to, but they have no desire to do that with hand sanitizer, although they sort of caught on at the end because even people in liquor stores needed hand sanitizer too. But yeah, it was a completely different business to the point now that I've applied for an industrial alcohol permit with the FDA because while I'm sure that Purell and other places are going to come back, and you've already seen the supply kind of flooding through now where there's much more available now, you know, at the end of the day, if I already have an industrial alcohol manufacturing plant, why not diversify and look at other ways of bringing in revenue? Not just, by the way, from hand sanitizer, but everything else. Think about all the things where industrial alcohol is in, from wipes, which are very scarce right now, to cleaning solution or sanitizing solution. And you can go across the board with that. If you think about, I'm not doing it, but like even mouthwash has alcohol. I mean, it's endless of where ethanol, which is the base, can be used in a number of products.
Right, that's awesome. Are you still seeing lines for people waiting for hand sanitizer, or has that died down?
Oh no, that's died down considerably. But I still have a lot of like restaurants and bars that I have relationships with because they sell my alcohol that need hand sanitizer. I'll tell you right now, one of the toughest things to get still, because you know, I still, a lot of people have not gone back to work. And so the manufacturing is still far behind, whether it's plastic bottles or it's all cyclical. They're all related, right? And so one of the number one things that I've seen, and maybe Eric can speak to this, is the dispensers. Like everyone needs dispensers for the hand sanitizer now in the restaurants. Those are scarce because everyone has to sanitize and you have to provide that to your customers as an extra cost now. And those are not easy to come by.
Yeah, I agree.
Thanks.
You know, it's can be the little thing. You know, we have spray bottles but no triggers, or we have the gallon bottles but no pumps, or you know, there's lots of little fringe things that come along that it's hard to get it all at once.
Yeah, definitely some pain points or some blind spots. Have there been any other blind spots, you know, as you guys have started pivoting in your operations that have come to light? That maybe have provided some new opportunities for you. You know, Eric, I think you mentioned you guys have a retail portion of it. You know, since you haven't been able to operate that quite as much, did that give you some time to pivot what your focus was to find some new opportunities for Richard Supply? For sure.
Yeah, so we have walk-in counter displays and retail business out of all 3 of our locations. And then when the stay-at-home orders came through, obviously we had to close that part of our business. We were an essential business, so we could still move product out the back door of our buildings and through warehouse and delivery. But yeah, all of our face-to-face business was put on hold. We're back open now. But during that time, it definitely, you know, we had to kind of move on the fly and come up with different ways to communicate with our customers. Our business is a very much a relationship, face-to-face business. And so customers couldn't come to us, and for the most part, we couldn't go visit our customers either. So we had to get very good at calls like these. And then, you know, we made some investments in some texting technology that allows our customers to text directly from their shops directly into our inside sales team without any type of intermediators or anything like that. So that's been very beneficial. You know, having curbside service and online will call pickup. You know, our website and e-commerce platform has been a big investment for us over the last few years. So it's at a point now where we can, you know, actively try to steer customers to placing orders through the website and online, and then we can have it ready for them to pick up in there. So the technology aspect has definitely been a change for us over the last 3 months in just terms of how we're using and connecting with our customers electronically.
Great. So Eric P., I guess we're going to kind of try to tie this to the market and what you're seeing. So, you know, Richard Supply sounds like they've made some initial investments or additional investments in the tech and the e-commerce space that has provided more opportunity, which seems like it's going to provide some value and benefit in the long run. What are you seeing from a market perspective that may be a driver of this as well that can kind of indicate some value that's been added there?
Yeah, I mean, so we are definitely seeing a shift towards selling online, and that's been happening for years, right? But, you know, COVID has kind of sped that up a little bit. An example of that is we're working with a company that is an e-commerce company. It's selling solely online. And we started discussions with them prior to the COVID period, so back in January, February. And at that time, you know, they were projecting maybe 35 million of revenue for the year. As we've kept in contact with them and keep talking to them about what they're thinking, you know, for the rest of the year, those projections have gone up significantly, up to, you know, around 45 million, maybe over, for top line revenue, and they're keeping margins pretty steady. So, you know, a company like that was able to really, you know, prosper during COVID because they were solely online to begin with. So we're kind of seeing more companies push that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just did mental math in my head. That's like a 200% or 150% increase in revenue. So that's pretty
Roughly.
good growth rate. Yeah. Marcus, what about you guys from the Blackland distilling area? You know, you spoke of liquor stores earlier and being able to have some additional marketing perspectives there. What about you? What other opportunities have arisen for you guys?
Well, you market in the liquor business, you market to two different people. You're marketing to liquor stores and you're marketing to what's called on-premise or bars and restaurants, okay? And so I've always focused on liquor stores because we have a really cool bottle, and it's a custom bottle, like unlike most. Here you can kind of see it here, maybe not, maybe you can't see it here, but it's something. You can go to my website. It's something nice that people will get when they walk into the liquor store, they'll grab it off the shelf. And they'll give us a chance because the bottles are so nice. And it's a lot more difficult in the bar restaurant setting because people will either order a drink and it's already in the cocktail, or occasionally the waitress or waiter will say, well, what kind of vodka do you want, or what kind of bourbon do you want? But most of the time they don't. They're going to pick it for you. So then I have to get in with the bar manager or the buyer, and then 3 weeks later it's a different person. It is just a lot of work to get into bars and restaurants. Now I spend time there, but I've always marketed to our liquor stores because that's our bread and butter. And right now that's paid off for us early on because, again, bars and restaurants have been closed. Everyone's going to liquor stores. They still haven't stopped going to liquor stores right now. That is still on fire. And so I've only increased my liquor store sales in liquor store marketing in terms of where my focus is and trying to expand my footprint that way. And then kind of to Eric's other point, like you've seen a bunch of online liquor services pop up. You've seen delivery services like Drizzly and some other people pop up so that you can just order it and have it delivered to your door. So really right now, that's most of my focus. And now we've reopened the tasting room. But there's just too much uncertainty in the bars and restaurants right now and what's going on. I will also say it's been beneficial because local is big right now. Like everyone is support local, support Texas. And so unlike our label, it's a big, you know, we have Texas on there, and, you know, really focusing on that right now is beneficial to us.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I've used some of those liquor store apps as well. So they work out pretty great when it shows up on your front porch. Well, I kind of speak to us a little bit, Marcus, about the additional investments you had to make to start developing the hand sanitizer. And is that something that you see is going to be, you know, selling that hand sanitizer is giving you value in the future, or is there a byproduct of that effort to make those that's going to be able to add some additional value for you in the long run?
Yeah, I mean, it was expensive to buy all of the chemicals. To even find the chemicals were hard enough, like glycerin and things were difficult to find, and isopropyl alcohol, which are necessary for hand sanitizer, and label and get label approval and register with the FDA. There was a lot of red tape to cut through to do it, which I'm not complaining about, and I'm sure me being a lawyer really helped compared to some other distilleries. So yeah, the hand sanitizer brought in some revenue, but we also used the hand sanitizer as an entry point to a bunch of other liquor stores to say, hey, let us help you as our partners. Here's some hand sanitizer. Let's do some business and maybe you'll carry us. And we probably tripled the number of liquor stores we were in before COVID to where we are right now. And I'm still handing out hand sanitizer. So in that regard, I think that that's really helped us grow pretty quickly in this time when a lot of other people have been closing down.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely interesting to hear. And I wondered if every liquor store I go or every distillery I go to now is going to just be selling like a rack of hand sanitizer on the side. But it sounds like it's more than just the product itself. It's the.
Let me just tell you, if I can interrupt, the dirty secret about distilleries is that 80 to 90% of distilleries bring in alcohol from a place called MGP in Indiana, and then they run it through their still, and then they put it in a bottle and market it, which is fine. I really have no problem with that. But when the zombie apocalypse hits or whatever, or COVID hits, and you have to make your base ethanol from grain because there is no ethanol, then that doesn't work. So eventually, yeah, maybe some other people will make hand sanitizer. So I doubt it because of the red tape. And also, again, I'm not being critical of my fellow distillers or brewers out there, but a lot of people get into this because they've made some stuff at home and they think that's cool and all of that. They're not really into this idea of business, I don't think, and the bureaucracy and the compliance and things. And hand sanitizer is much more strict in terms of that than alcohol.
Interesting. So Eric P., I guess, you've seen there's other costs that are obviously going into each of these companies. And so some of it is the impact of just, having to stop operations. You've got that overhead cost that you can't get rid of. Or you've decided to take on a new investment. So Marcus and his team went and developed the ability to make hand sanitizer. What are you seeing from other companies with this type of noise and these type of investments? And how is that working through the value of a company?
Yeah. So one, you're right. There's a ton of noise right now, and there probably will continue to be for the next, several months, right? No saying for sure how far it's going to go at this point. But one of the things that we've seen is increases in labor costs, for example. We're working with a company that's doing structured cabling, and they have a production line, and on that line, those manufacturer workers, they are basically asking for hazard pay. That's how I think of it, at least. So the company's having to pay them an extra couple dollars an hour, which when you take a step back and you're talking about 30, 40 employees getting paid $2 or $3 an hour more each. That adds up costs pretty quickly. So that's the type of thing that we're seeing right now. And then there's as far as driving value and kind of what value looks like going forward. Some people may have heard this term. I think it's starting to become more popular, but it's EBITDA. And that's basically EBITDA with a C, and the C being COVID. So earnings before COVID, as well as the normal items. And for that, I mean, we'd have to go back and really to get a true earnings number, adjust and normalize for something like labor costs that have increased over a 3, 4, 6 month period. And that's just one example of noise that is going to be in the numbers for the financial numbers for these companies for the next probably 12 months or so, when you're looking at a trailing number. Kayla, I think you're on mute.
You're muted.
Thanks for the heads up. I would have kept talking to myself. You couldn't read my lips? Eric W. So at Richard Supply, obviously, you know, if you're trying to figure out where you stand right now, if anything, it's really good to know where your financial performance is, because you need to know what those trigger points are to figure out if you need to pivot again. And so, you know, listening to some of the things that Eric P has said, talking about all the additional costs, what are you running into? And maybe there's not a solution yet, but what are you seeing at Richard Supply in trying to monitor and comparing where your operations are this year versus last year? How are you guys addressing some of that noise?
It's very difficult. You know, we're kind of having discussions around what Eric was talking about, is how do we remove, you know, the last 2 months out of our numbers. It's, you know, I was having this conversation yesterday, is it, you know, there is no comparison to this year. You know, it's virtually impossible to look at last May versus this May. It just doesn't make any sense. So for us, it's trying to just look at it through those glasses of trying to just see what, you know, how much of this is really affecting our business. How many of our customers actually are running at 30% capacity? How many of our customers have actually shut down? And really just trying to tie a bow around that, but it's very, very difficult. The other thing that's difficult, obviously, is looking at cash flow and receivables, you know, and we've got customers that typically pay in 30 days that are now telling us, hey, it's going to be 90 days before you get a check. And so we've had to have some difficult discussions with customers, and we've had to have the same conversations with our suppliers, you know, where we've kind of told them that what the situation is. So this cash flow dance is another big thing as we look forward to the next couple months of how is that going to affect, you know, how we're able to make further investments in the company and do those kind of things. So I think we've got a good groundwork laid out, but again, you know, I can't tell you what the market's going to look like on Monday morning. So we're just kind of, you know, flying at this point, but trying to keep as directed as we can.
Yeah, for sure. That's the liquidity standpoint is something I think that everybody's seeing for sure. And on the healthcare side, it's been very interesting of them shifting a bunch of money up front, but then asking business providers to give it back within 120 days. So, right, you know, without receiving any payment. So it seems like across the entire country or the entire industry, all industries, cash flow and liquidity is the biggest deal. You know, Marcus, I think you had mentioned you had made some investments up front. Eric, what are your thoughts with how do you consider these additional investments that companies have made? Eric P, this is additional investments that companies have made, and maybe something that's not as their traditional business. I mean, how is that being looked at from a value standpoint if you've got a new arm of non-traditional business being added onto a company that's historically operated doing something else?
Sure. I mean, what Marcus is talking about with industrial alcohol is it's tangential to his business, at least. So, you know, there's some synergy. I'll say, like he had the equipment already, right, Marcus? So there's definitely an advantage to generating that extra revenue and the extra cash flow, and especially if you can continue to do that going forward. What's tough to say is how a buyer is going to look at that. You know, somebody who is going to buy a distillery 6 months ago, they may have not been interested in buying a company that was doing industrial alcohol. 6 months from now, it's hard to say what their opinion is going to be on that. And that's the big question, I think, is, you know, are they going to view that as a positive, or do they want to be really focused on, you know, just distilling for people to drink the alcohol? Or, you know, is it a good thing to have that extra line? Personally, I like that there's, you know, the extra line of business, and you can do more things, you're more flexible. But there will be some buyers out there, I'm sure, that will prefer it to be more focused. So I think it's going to be on a buyer to buyer basis.
All right. So Eric P., just to kind of keep it going, from a market perspective and where you're seeing things today and where they stand, it's definitely a loaded question saying, where do you think the next 12 to 18 months is looking? But, from what you guys have seen at Palomino Capital from a market perspective and, if some of the deals are starting, what do you think the next 12 to 18 months look like from today? Again, loaded question, completely off the wall.
That is a loaded question. I'm not a fortune or a future teller. But yeah, look, over the next, and I'll call it 6 to 18 months, we at Palomino, we do kind of a thesis that we think healthcare companies, and probably specifically providers, so physician providers, so healthcare services, that they're going to be closing on M&A transactions more frequently relative to the rest of the market than they were pre-COVID. So we think we'll see an uptick there. So that's definitely something that, at least in the short term, year and a half, that Palomino, we at Palomino are going to be focusing on. We'll probably do more work in the healthcare space than we have previously. Typically, we do maybe 25-30% of our work in healthcare, and I wouldn't be surprised if we're 50% or more over the next 12 months, just because we think those are the deals that are going to get closed. And the reason for that is, it's pretty easy to talk to someone about the volume dropping and then picking back up for a provider. And we saw an example of that because we actually closed the deal at the end of May with an ophthalmology group, and their volume dropped to maybe 20-25% at one point during the COVID period. And then once things opened back up in May, by the second week of May, they were up around 75-80% of volume and trending towards 100% sometime the month of June. Because of that, the buyer was comfortable with moving forward and closing at the end of May. So that's just kind of an example of one that's happened recently.
Do you think that, as you structure these deals, that you probably had some due diligence done before COVID, and then you're trying to get through the deal post-COVID, and obviously it looks very different? Are there any provisions within these deals that you're seeing, whether it's a clawback type setup where there's some kind of caveat that the buyer could get money back if it doesn't get back to normal, or, anything abnormal that you're seeing happening in deals in the next 12 to 18 months to try to cover this riskiness of having a very different business for a couple of months during the year?
Yeah, so in our experience, there wasn't a retrade with that particular deal. Doesn't mean that there couldn't be on other ones. This practice got up to speed pretty quickly. Where we did see adjustments was in like the reps and warranties around some COVID stuff, especially around the PPP loan, the practice to take out PPP loans. So you have to kind of have some things in place there. And then there was an additional holdback as well, but it wasn't a huge number. It's not something that impacted the deal greatly. So, I mean, going forward in general though, because that's just one specific case, I would expect more in the purchase agreement. There's going to be probably a few more reps and warranty clauses regarding COVID or COVID related items. And, that's probably the main thing. There will probably be maybe some small holdbacks. I don't think you're going to see significant changes as far as that. Now, as far as the multiples go, that's kind of a to be determined. And we do think that on the buy side, there's going to be opportunities to buy probably on the lower end of what we've seen previously. But that's going to start, I think, in a few months and probably be there for about a year.
Okay. So, Marcus, Eric W., and I guess I'll probably look at you first, Eric W., is when you think about what you've done in the past 6 months and kind of setting your company to keep weathering the storm with all the changes, what opportunities or growth have you seen based on that that's going to set you up probably for the future? And even, people mention that there's a possible second wave that's coming. What have you guys done that you think is probably going to set you up to be able to weather that storm a little bit easier the second time around than the first, if anything? It's so unknown.
Yeah, so basically, I mentioned earlier, but our business is very much a relationship business. And even though we've seen as, there's been some generational change from a procurement and buyer's perspective, that's gone a little bit more towards e-commerce and the texting and those kind of things. But over the last couple months, we've really learned again that regardless of how you're communicating with a customer, you need to be a good partner for them, and that relationship still matters. So whether you're getting your orders via email or online or face-to-face, the bottom line for us is that still have to be really good at what we do. And as we've seen some of the larger players in our industry and some of the publicly traded distribution companies have made furloughs and cutbacks and layoffs and those kind of things, we've actually made investments in people and hired additional salespeople and technologies. And so, I feel we're pretty well positioned to where maybe a customer historically had bought from a larger competitor of ours. They've learned over the last couple of months that they're just not going to get the service that they're used to. So it's opened a lot of doors for us to come in and kind of be that, Marcus mentioned earlier, but we're the local, we're Texas born and bred, we're a family run business, and we treat our customers really well. So that's really helped us differentiate ourselves from some of these bigger players in our world that again are going the opposite direction. So I think we've been able to establish ourselves when things aren't going really well or things aren't going as they usually do. What we've seen is that, when people step up and help fill the void and help people out, that tends to come back around in the long run. So I think we've done a really good job of that over the last couple of months and kind of earned some new relationships with customers who historically maybe we weren't getting the same opportunities as we're getting now. So, it all just comes down to how well you treat people, and if you do a good job and help people out when they're in trouble, typically you'll see better things down the road. So that's what we're expecting.
You're setting me up perfectly to give one of the ACG lines of relationships are the deal. So I think that resonates with everybody. Before we get into our Q&A, I guess, last question, Marcus, what is the largest takeaway you've taken from going through this over the past couple of months as a small business owner to a medium-sized business owner? What's the biggest takeaway?
Well, a couple things. I would just say diversification of revenues was good in the short term for us, and to be the ability to pivot, but also while at the same time keeping the long-term goal of growth, because a lot of people stopped, and a lot of people just shut it down, and there was a market opportunity for us to get in there and expand, which we took advantage of. And the biggest takeaway I also took was our distributor is Benny Keith, which is the largest beer distributor in the state of Texas. They have Budweiser and Bud Light and a lot of other beers. But we're their first whiskey. We were their first gin. We were their second vodka. And there was a realization during this time that, maybe beer is not the future. Maybe distilled spirits are the future, because beer took a huge hit during this for a number of reasons, and that's another conversation. But we finally got enough attention and growth now, and the momentum has really started, because once you're in a lot of different places and people start talking about you and drinking you and seeing you, then it's sort of a snowball effect. So all of it has been positive in that regard.
All right. Well, great. Well, I think, there's a few questions that have come up. We'll be happy to take any more, but I think the first question we have right now, Marcus, is for you. What % of your revenue are you seeing from hand sanitizer now? And maybe even during the bulk of everything that was happening? And what percent do you envision seeing going forward? And, you know, if you have those numbers available or on top of mind.
Yeah, I think ultimately at the end of the year, it's going to be somewhere between 10 and 15%. And it's only, excuse me, that will only decrease because our alcohol sales continue to increase, right? It's not that we're selling less. It's just that we're just selling a lot more alcohol menu, and then the tasting room has reopened. So, I mean, that's a small percentage, but it's 10 or 15% I wouldn't have had but for switching over and making hand sanitizer, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's see. Any other big questions that we have out there? I'm still trying to gather a few of them in the chat room. Eric, I guess, you know, one of my questions for you would be, you know, with the transition of having to shut down some of your retail locations and shifting the way the business is done, Eric W., how has the company's, you know, employees manage that process, and how have you been able to manage that transition and change? You know, people don't people don't mind change as long as they're the ones making it and it's not being made to them. So how have you managed that from your employee force?
Well, the most important thing for us was trying to set up, you know, a structure that was safe and that they felt comfortable in. You know, as you can probably tell just by being around now, some people are much more sensitive to restrictions and health suggestions than others. So we basically provided a structure for our employees that we felt was the best way to keep everybody healthy. And then we allowed them to kind of work within that structure. So, you know, it's masks and social distancing and hand sanitizer and washing your hands and, you know, and then and then just structuring kind of some of the ways that customers are allowed to move throughout the stores. So, you know, we tried to lay a framework and then allowed our employees some leeway if maybe they were still uncomfortable, you know, with even the precautions that we put into place. And so it's a work in progress. Everybody's different. And so, you know, again, if someone feels very uncomfortable about a situation, then we've laid out the form for them to voice that, and we'll handle those on a case-by-case basis.
All right, good to hear. Marcus, what about you spoke earlier about beer sales dropping. I'm interested on a little bit on what's the driver of that. You know, everybody I think here knows that ACGYP is all about their beer event. And so, you know, we're happy to fill that void as soon as we can all get together again. But can you speak a little more to that? I'm interested in how that happened in the market as well.
Sure, it's a couple of reasons that happened. One, it became popular a while ago, the born on date. So beer, every day that it sits in the can or the bottle begins to slowly degrade. Okay, the best beer you're ever going to have is the day it's brewed at the brewery. It's why a lot of craft breweries have had success. I'm not saying that, you know, a beer 30, 60 days after it's been brewed is not good, but it's better. And so the other problem with beer is that they have a return policy. So if it goes to the store and it's not purchased, or more importantly, if it goes to the restaurant or the bar and it's not purchased, then they have to buy it back. That's part of their agreement. And that's tough because 70% of beer sales is consumed on premise, so at a bar or a restaurant. Well, COVID comes in and shuts it down. Beer just had to immediately stop production, a lot of breweries. You certainly had some beer drinking at home, but it was nothing like distilled spirits and wine. And there are many reasons for preference. You know, that's a whole nother conversation we can have of why people want to drink their vodka or their tequila or bourbon as opposed to beer when they're shut in. But beer took a huge hit in that instance. And so I think there was a correction in the market coming, I think. There were too many craft breweries. There are too many craft breweries. There's fighting for market share and fighting for distribution. And it's really hard to get distribution because you're going to compete. Not only now do you have to compete against Budweiser and Miller Lite and the big boys, but now you have small craft distilleries that have taken the market share. But so how do you even compete as a new brewery against those? So for me, always the future of breweries has been tap rooms that don't distribute, that can make a beer for 50 cents and sell it for $5 so that you can come in and have a place to go as a destination event. And I still think that's right. It's the problem is still COVID right now, and people don't want to go out and they don't want to congregate. Hopefully next year that will all change because I still think there's a revenue model that will really work for the craft brewer. They can make some things that Miller Lite and Bud Light can't make. But again, I think we're going to see a lot of closing of breweries, and that's not my opinion as an analyst in any way, or a banker, or a hedge fund manager. That's just me as the distiller in the alcohol business.
It's interesting. It's definitely interesting. I think we've got time for our last question. So Eric P., this one's for you. So, you know, Marcus and Eric W. have talked about building, you know, essentially goodwill in their own operating businesses. What about you from a, you know, your business in a, you know, service provider perspective, or even from a, you know, investment banking perspective? What have you been able to do to develop the goodwill throughout all this?
Yeah, so obviously it's a little bit different, right? Being kind of products based versus service based. And this is something that I would say we try to do all the time, not just during COVID, but I think we've done it even more during COVID. And that's just constantly having conversations with people and helping people out where we can. So because we've got that kind of operating background as well, where we've owned businesses, when we talk to clients or potential clients, we can talk to them from that perspective and help, you know, with things that are on the operating side. And we do that just advice wise, right? And we do that consistently. And I'd say we've done it even more over the past few months, just talking to business owners and helping them where we can. And that's just a conversation. That's not something that we're expecting an engagement with them. We're just helping them. That's building goodwill. You know, we're not charging them for that conversation. We might talk to them for a few hours. We might help them with something that takes a couple hours. But that's all just goodwill type activities. And yeah, obviously in the future, we hope if they do ever consider an exit, that, you know, maybe we can at least be in the conversation when they look at that. But that's the type of thing we do. I'd say we did that before COVID, but even more so the past couple months.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I'm an auditor, so I just come in and look at the replay tapes, and a nuisance to a lot of people. But if anything, I do feel like, you know, in the past couple of months, I've been able to develop some real relationships outside of just tell me your numbers and let me sign the paper and move on. So it's definitely something. Eric W. really hit on it too. You know, it's all about the relationship. So, you know, that pretty much wraps it up for our panel discussions. I know we all want to clap at home or do one of these, you know, for all the information that you guys have shared and have, you know, provided today. We did record this program, and it will be available for viewing soon. So we hope you all stay on for the networking portion now when things get really exciting. We are working on turning on your videos all back on and sorting you into breakout rooms. And so if you haven't done this before, it's pretty neat. We'll have 2 rounds of networking, and you'll be randomly assorted into different groups. We hope it gives you an opportunity to meet some people that you haven't met before, or catch up with those that you already know. Christy, are we good for the first room, or do we need to tell some stand-up jokes for a few minutes?
No, we're good. I'm going to go ahead and move everybody right now.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Well, so I hope you guys enjoyed the networking. I'd like to give one more thank you to our panelists, Marcus, Kiprios, Eric Priamo, and Eric Wessinger. So thank you again to our sponsors, BDO, Haynes Boone, Winston and Strawn, UMB Bank, and Calvetti Ferguson, along with the YP committee for arranging this panel, and to all of you for joining us today. Don't forget, the ACG Global is hosting the first ever virtual member summit. So registration is open and you can start booking meetings. The new software allows you to reach out to all attendees. It's members only. So if your membership lapsed, now is the time to get it back. And we'll see you on June 23rd through June 25th. And finally, don't forget to register for our upcoming virtual events. And remember, relationships are the deal. So thanks, guys. I appreciate all of your time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. And that's, you can turn the recording off now.